Hi everybody, this is Dr. Chris Dost. Welcome back to the Biblical Languages and Literature channel. Before we get into our video for today, I just want to share with you a few upcoming courses that Sabra Global Education is offering. Starting Monday, April 3rd, we have Jesus' Parables as Jewish Scripture, taught by R. Stephen Notley, Distinguished Professor of Bible at Alliance University. This course meets 1 hour per week for 4 weeks. Likewise, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the New Testament, which will be taught by Dr. Jeffrey Garcia of Alliance University, will also meet 1 hour a week for 4 weeks, and that course begins in late April. In addition, Rabbi Dr. Robert Harris of the Jewish Theological Seminary will be teaching a 1 hour per week ongoing course in the book of Isaiah, and the course is entitled The Book of Isaiah from Yesterday to Today. And this will be an expositional study of the book of Isaiah with some rabbit trails off into medieval exegesis, both Jewish and Christian. And then finally, I'll be teaching the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, an introduction. And that course is an ongoing course which meets 1 hour per week as well. We hope to see you in class. All right, let's get started.
I couldn't find anything, especially in the early portions of let's say, the Gospels and Acts. I could find nothing that was un-Jewish. There's no everything I could find within Jewish writings in the period, and so, which was for me a surprise, a pleasant surprise, because I realized that this stuff has come out of a very distinctive religious culture, and but it also helped me to read the New Testament text in a different way. Because once my eyes had been trained, or my ears had been trained to sort of hear things within a different religious cultural setting, then it made me go back and try to read the New Testament with that same sensitivity. And what I found oftentimes is that I had been misreading. I was trying to force upon it a culture that didn't belong on it. And again, I think that's a challenge for all of us, is to climb inside of a text and to try to listen how it's being written, what the intent of the writers.
Your background is indicative of the fact that you're not just interested in the literature of the Second Temple period, the world of Jesus, let's say, but you're also interested in the land and the archaeology. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you're, over the course of your career, you've been involved with historical research and archaeological research?
It all starts as a starving student, which we all, if you've been a student, you've starved. And living in a foreign country, so you're limited in terms of employment and things. And early on, I was approached by the Anglican Church in the 80s to start to help them set up and found a biblical study tour program. They had a guest house with rooms and everything had been renovated, but they wanted to have more than just casual guests. They wanted to have groups come in that they could teach and, a little bit more serious approach to the country. Now, today they're a dime a dozen, but I promise you that in the 80s that wasn't the case. Very few were doing it like that. And so I found myself thrust into the field and being out working with Israeli guides and recounting biblical events and stories and narratives, but on site, which makes a difference. And you do it more than once. You repeatedly do this, and I got fascinated with the interaction or integration of the physical setting and the biblical narrative, or both the Hebrew Bible and New Testament, and that sometimes when I was on site, the movie in my brain, where all of us have sort of this mental picture of how we see an event unfolding, it would get jarred. it wouldn't work. It doesn't fit. And I'd have to readjust how I understood that story. And I was fascinated with that whole approach. And so I did that. And then in the mid 90s, I was hired at a graduate institution in Jerusalem, now called the Jerusalem University College. They asked me to set up a graduate program in New Testament studies. And it was great. I mean, I got to bring in really the top. You know, you bring in a Gabi Barkai on archaeology, Hanan Eshel on the Dead Sea Scrolls, Chana Safrai on. So it's like a smorgasbord for my students, feeding there. But one of the things I wanted them to do is that I didn't want them just to sit in a classroom. I wanted them to get out in the field. So I took it upon myself to teach them historical geography, which is a multidisciplinary approach that uses land, geography, general geography, philology, language, toponyms, place names, and then archaeology. You're sort of in conversation with archaeology as well. And for me, it was life-changing. It was really in terms of a whole integration of not staying in a single discipline, but actually getting out of my lane, feeling uncomfortable in a discipline that I had not championed, and then it got pushed along. Anson Rainey, who was teaching with me at JUC, asked me to translate Eusebius's Onomasticon. At the time when he asked me, it had never been translated into English. I didn't realize there were two other translations in process, but I did a translation. I tried to resist, but he wouldn't let me, and so it's a catalog of over 900 names where Eusebius goes in and he describes them in his day. It's a picture snapshot of about the year 304, 305. So it's pre-Byzantine. There are no churches, but he's identifying mostly sites from the Hebrew Bible, but some from the Gospels and Acts. And he tells you where they are, like he gives you measurements, finding where they are, and tells you if there are any remains there, maybe what communities living there, Samaritans, Jews, Christians, villages there. So he describes them. So it's the starting point. It really is the cornerstone, the starting point for either historical geography or archaeology. Everybody starts there. So that sort of got me into there. And then Anson asked me to do the Sacred Bridge, which is an atlas. People say it's a historical geography dressed up like an atlas. And then I had to be serious about my ideas, because you can talk about them, but you go to print, it becomes a different matter. So I found myself engaged in a lot of different questions when it deals with New Testament historical geography. I find, I have to be careful how I say this, but I find a lot of times New Testament scholars do not give sufficient attention to the physical setting of the Gospels and Acts. I can't tell you how many times I've met New Testament scholars. They may have been teaching 15, 20 years, and they tell me that it's their dream to go to the Holy Land. And I don't know how they can spend their whole career teaching about a book at a place they don't know. I tell folks that sometimes I feel like it's, if you had a world-class French historian who doesn't know French and had never been to France, you wouldn't give them very much credence. But that's sometimes I feel like that's what we deal with, is that people do not. I mean, I've had the luxury of living there for 16 years, which was an enormous blessing, because it immersed me in issues of culture and language, and physical setting. But still, we need to be making a better effort at integration of those. And so, the thing in the background is I got caught up in the whole question of the site identification of Bethsaida, which, apart from Jerusalem, Capernaum, is the most mentioned site in the Gospels, and it was the last remaining New Testament site that had yet to be identified. We're in a long process since the middle of the 19th century of rediscovering the biblical sites that people get on a plane and fly over to see. Today, 150 years ago, people didn't know where they were. Megiddo, Capernaum, Caesarea, no one knew where these places were. And so and Bethsaida was is one of the last. It's the last, I would say, the last city of the Gospels. We didn't know where it was. There was another Israeli archaeologist who had been excavating another site, which he claimed was Bethsaida, but it didn't. It had problems. There were a couple of issues with it, serious issues with it. And so I published in the early 2000s an article challenging the site identification there. It caused a bit of a firestorm, which led to eventually his challenge: if you think it's something else, go ask me. So in 2014, former student of mine helped to organize a shovel survey at an alternate site. Since the 19th century, there have been two main sites. One was the site this other gentleman was excavating, and then the site that we're on right now. And so we did a shovel survey, and from that, the archaeologists were able to determine that the profile of the site fit the historical description. So we, in 2016, began to dig. There were more than a few skeptics. I would say almost everybody thought we were crazy. Even the archaeologists that we dig with, when they're honest, which they are more honest these days about this, but they actually say that they actually didn't think there was anything there. So they were able to dig, we were digging, so they thought, why not? So they came along, but they did not expect what we have found. And again, no one was really much on board until 2017. We found a Roman period bathhouse at the Roman level, which is one of the Josephus only mentions Bethsaida once, and that's to describe its urbanization. I'll use that term, of Herod Philip turning it into a polis, taking a village and turning it into a small Roman polis. And the bathhouse belongs to the Roman polis. It doesn't. There are no Jewish villages with a Roman bath. So that sort of stopped presses. Everybody went, "Oh, maybe they're not crazy," and so it unfolded. And then none of us expected to find the church. It's Byzantine period. I wasn't really focused on Byzantine era, but there's a large basilica on the site that is, in Byzantine tradition, was a basilica built over the house of Peter and Andrew. And so we've been excavating. This is behind my shoulder is a inscription found in 2021 in the center of the church. It commemorates or remembers that the renovations that took place. It's dedicating to, and unfortunately it broke off in the middle, and so we don't get the bottom half of it. It talks about a bishop who sponsored it or helped, was a benefactor in the renovations, but we don't know his name. So we didn't get that. But fortunately, last summer, we found a more important inscription that mentions and references Peter. It talks about, it's an inscription, again, remembering the benefactor who paid for a mosaic floor, and then it petitions the chief of the apostles, which in the Byzantine period is always Peter, to intercede on his behalf and on the behalf of his sons. So we have a strong connection between Peter and the church, which again only goes to strengthen the idea that this church was the church mentioned by several Byzantine pilgrims as the church built over the house of Peter and Andrew. And so I'm in the thick of that. Where this next summer we're hoping to move more of our efforts back to the Roman period remains. We've done electromagnetic scans of the area. It is full of houses, walls, large structures under the ground waiting to be excavated. And unlike Area A, where the church is, when you go out away from that central area, it is immediately Roman, first, second, third century, only a few centimeters under the ground. So it's just covered with a bit of silt. So it's just waiting to be uncovered. And our goal is for the next 4 or 5 years to uncover as much of the early Roman period, New Testament, Bethsaida, Julius, that's the name that was given to it by Herod Philip, Bethsaida Julius, that uncover as much of it as possible in the next 4 to 5 years. So yeah, I'm engaged. I try to. People sometimes they ask me, says, well, what do? You always, here you work with Fruther and historical biography, and then you did, historical geography with Anson Rainey, Sacred Bridge. Then you translate a patristic work of Eusebius, and then you did a collection of early Jewish parables with Zev Safrai, and now you're excavating. And I said, the trick is to sort of get out of your lane occasionally and sort of challenged by other disciplines and to think outside of the box a bit. I said, plus I'm a person of varied interests. Why stay in just one thing? So it's I've been very, very, very fortunate in terms of the journey that's unfolded. But yeah.
Well, I appreciate, and I think I speak on behalf of everybody who's watching this, just deeply appreciate your willingness to take some time to share your journey, your scholarship with us. And, we look forward when we can tap you to having you teach occasionally on Sabra Global Education. And I know that students are going to be excited to learn more from you.
I look forward to the opportunity.
All right. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thank you. All right.
All right.